Here's the deal. Spotify is trying to take over the podcast industry, and no, I don't think that is an exaggeration. We already know Spotify bought a bunch of exclusive shows, and in the past they've bought companies like Gimlet, Anchor, Megaphone, and now news just broke that they bought Podsights and Chartable, two podcast companies having to do with analytics and ad attribution. They are literally trying to acquire all of the big names in podcasting to become the center of the podcast world. We cannot let that happen. All this news of Spotify acquiring these companies is literally giving me gray hairs in my beard. See? Now some of you might be asking, well, why is that a bad thing? Who cares if Spotify owns all of podcasting? Well, that means that most of the monetization, all the money, all the big shows are all going to be in one place, and it's going to be harder to launch podcasts and do independent podcasting, and it won't be open anymore. I literally made a whole video talking about what made podcasts special from the very beginning. When Apple introduced it in 2005 into the iTunes Store, and podcasts have always been based on RSS, an open web standard, and audio files, and Spotify is literally trying to change that. I believe there's one company that can stem the tide of Spotify trying to take over the industry. It can be a benefit to them and a benefit to the podcast industry as a whole and keep it open, and that is Apple. Here's what I think they need to do. By the way, this video is sponsored by Buzzsprout, a great podcast host to keep podcasting open on the web. All right, here's 5 things Apple can do to keep podcasting open and hopefully slow down this acquisition of the entire industry from Spotify. Number 1, make the best podcast app. Yes, the Apple Podcast app has gotten a lot better and it's pretty good, but it has a long way to go. I'm going to make a suggestion right here. I think Apple should buy the Pocket Cast team and the app, acqui-hire them. They've already been bought and sold by several companies already, and I think they can make a great podcast app, add better features like better up next management for episodes in the Apple Podcast app, help the navigation, maybe even make the Apple Watch app a little better, make the Apple Podcast app the best app for listening to shows. And speaking of great features for podcasts, Buzzsprout, who's the sponsor for this video, is a great way to host your podcast. I host my podcast on Buzzsprout. They have great features like including transcriptions in the podcast. They let you make those little clips for your podcast right there. It's included in the plans. And you can actually have a free plan where you can upload up to 2 hours of audio every month. They also have great tools for beginning creators like magic mastering if you're unsure about leveling and all that kind of stuff. Buzzsprout can help you there too. Check them out at the link in the description and at buzzsprout.com. Number 2, bring that app to Android. It would benefit not only creators who are doing paid subscriptions. I have paid subscriptions in Apple Podcasts. I have found that the ease of having someone sign up right there in the Apple Podcast app has increased subscribers. We do this with the Apple Insider podcast. We had a Patreon, and then we started doing Apple subscriptions directly in the app, and we have 10 times more subscribers right there in the Apple Podcast app. So there is a benefit to that ease of use, and it still benefits Apple because they get a 30 or 15% cut right there from the podcast subscriptions. Make the Apple Podcast app available on all mobile platforms, and then those subscriptions will also be available everywhere. Apple already has its Apple Music app on Android, its Apple TV app. Once Apple has the best podcasting app that all listeners want to use, they already have a majority market share right now, and it's available on Android and iPhone. The third thing they can do is add some features that you don't find anywhere else. The podcast industry is trying to help transcriptions be available when listening to podcasts and features like that. Apple can use its system where it has the dashboard for creators, give them ability to make transcripts, make them easily accessible in the Apple Podcast app, and do the best job it can do. Apple has that whole integration, the whole stack. They can do that with things like podcast transcriptions. They can also add features like clip sharing. You see this in Castro and Overcast apps on the iPhone. Make it so listeners can easily share a 30-second clip right from the Apple Podcast app. This way, it's the best listening experience. You get things like transcripts, and you can share clips. Everyone will want to use the Apple Podcast app to listen to their shows. Then the fourth thing Apple can do is build incredible tools for podcast creators that they'll want to use on the platform. Spotify announced that they're going to do these interactive banners during ad reads. Well, Apple can do that. It already has the management side for podcast creators. Make it so you can make a little banner pop up while there's an ad read, so listeners can just tap on that banner and visit the sponsor website right away. Right now, if you do a paid subscription in Apple Podcasts, you can only upload WAV or FLAC files. Add the ability to do MP3s with chapters, so those paid subscribers get the best audio and chapter experience when listening to paid shows in Apple Podcasts. Also give creators the ability to make those clips you see like from Headliner, where you can have that graphical waveform, Podcast creators can share clips right from their episodes, build those kinds of features directly into the Apple Podcast Creator platform. Then, since you now have transcriptions in the app for listeners, maybe make it even easy or free for podcast creators to do transcriptions. Say they're powered by Siri. Have Siri do podcast transcriptions. Use all that AI and machine learning to make it as accurate as possible. This way, creators can start adding transcripts to their shows for free. They don't even have to pay for another service. And right now, Apple allows you to embed your podcast players and episodes, but I think Apple should let you make an entire website landing page for your podcast. Just take those embeddable players that you already have. This way, podcast creators who don't yet have a website can use something from Apple, kind of like you have artist pages and you can visit podcasts on the web. They kind of already have this now, but make it just a little more customizable so podcast creators will hopefully flock to using the Apple Podcast Creator tools. And finally, the fifth thing I think Apple can do is buy shows to become Apple Podcast shows, but unlike Spotify, who's trying to make all their shows exclusive, keep those shows open and on the internet, just make them Apple branded shows. That would still benefit Apple because they could be part of the ad revenue and ad deals that those big shows bring in, but those shows can still be open on the web, still powered by RSS. Maybe some features like early access or maybe some bonus content would be exclusive in the Apple Podcast app, but keep the main shows publicly available and keep that open spirit of podcasting that's been there for the last 15 years. Apple has been a friend of podcasts from the beginning. Their iTunes directory for podcasts powered many third-party apps for a long time, and they've kind of been like a benevolent arbiter for podcasts. And they are the ones with the resource and the influence to keep podcasting open so those small creators and independent creators can still find monetization and ad options that aren't all owned by Spotify. As Spotify buys these ad companies, they're in talks to buy Audio Boom, which is another hosting and ad platform. If Spotify acquires all these companies, podcasters are going to have to go to Spotify for monetization and ads and all that. And it will kill that open standard and the open spirit of podcasting that's been around for 15 years. Let's not let it happen. Apple, you can do it. Make the best podcast listening experience and the best podcast creation experience for those podcast creators. All right, rant over. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. I got lots of podcast content coming soon. And don't forget to check out Buzzsprout, the sponsor of this video. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.